to have you here with us today. I'm so excited about this event. But before we jump right into the questions and the theme of this event, I want to ask my panelists today a very good question. Is hot dog a sandwich or no? I'm going to ask Jessica first.
I'm going to say no.
Why?
It's not under a sandwich menu. It's typically its own category.
That's
And
very true.
yeah,
Yeah. All right. Caroline, what do you think? Is hot dog a sandwich or not?
I'm also a no because its own category, but I share what I think Tim will share is a crisis of conscience around this because it is kind of like a sandwich. But I'm going to go no.
What about you, Patrick?
I have to say yes. I think definition of a sandwich is anything between two pieces of bread. And even KFC proved to us that it doesn't even have to be bread. You can put two things between pieces of chicken and it can be a sandwich. So
Sandwich.
I think in the broad definition, I'm a yes.
What about you, Tim?
Patrick just took that like all the way to the extreme. So very much an existential crisis on it. I think I have to go absolutely not. It is not a sandwich, and I would not want to consider it one.
Well, I agree with Patrick. I believe it is a sandwich. It's just a special sandwich with a special name. But this is a hot take. I'm gonna ask the attendees to go on the chat and tell us if you think hot dogs are a sandwich or not. I'm so excited to have you here today to talk about investing in your employees' well-being. And talking about hot dogs, if you want to keep your well-being, your health, do not eat a lot of them. Um, but today we're going to talk about your employees' well-being and how this is good for your company. My name is Eduardo. I am a community events manager, Modern Sales Pros, and your host for the next hour. If for those of you not familiar with Modern Sales Pros, you're definitely missing out because we are the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related supported disciplines. Our mission is to create a great environment for our 23,000 and growing members. You heard it right, 23,000 members. So they can answer questions they would struggle to solve on their own and to help them see around corners they might not know about. And we do that through great live sessions like this one you're about to experience, and through a robust online forum, and in the near future, in-person events. We're about to launch the page for our April Summit, so keep an eye out for this amazing event that we are preparing. But for now, let's focus on how to get the most out of this session with Blueboard and those amazing panelists. I have some housekeeping notes for us. First, this event is being recorded. You'll be able to access the recording in the key takeaways from our panelists on the previous events page on the MSP website, so you can always have great information when you most need it. And second, if you have a question for our panelists, and they told me backstage that they love answering questions, so please let's shower them with questions. Use the Q&A function and we'll be sure to get to them during the event. And this event today is brought to us by the team at Blueboard, and I have the amazing Tim here with me today to tell us the amazing work that Blueboard is doing. Hey Tim, can you unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about Blueboard?
Yep. Hi, everybody. My name's Tim. I'm a sales director here at Blueboard. So Blueboard is a reward and recognition and incentive platform that focuses exclusively on experiential rewards. So instead of the traditional cash, gift cards, points types of recognition, we make it super easy for companies to give meaningful experiential rewards. So think skydiving, massages, glass blowing, all the way to once in a lifetime experiences, whether that's dining out at Michelin star restaurants or a family trip to Disney, all booked and planned by a personal Blueboard concierge. So we've had the opportunity to partner with some of the world's best employers from Mixpanel, Segment, Glassdoor, Shake Shack, GoPro, all helping them celebrate their people in a more meaningful way. Super excited to be here today.
That is awesome. Go check Blueboard's website right now if you're watching us live. And if you're watching the recording, it's very worth seeing what they're doing. We have an amazing set of panelists here today. And before they introduce themselves, I'm going to let you know, guys, that the public says hot dog is not a sandwich. So Patrick and I, we're losing this battle here, but it's fine. We can take it. It's fine. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to introduce you to our fabulous moderator, Patrick. Please introduce yourself and take it from here. I hope you all enjoy this conversation, and I'll be back for a few closing notes at the end. But Patrick, please take it from here.
Thank you, Eduardo, and I appreciate the invite today. I am saddened to hear that it's not a sandwich.
Not a sandwich.
You know, a sandwich makes me happy. Hot dogs make me happy. It's all good. Either way. Anyways, I work for Twilio. Twilio is a public company. We are a customer engagement platform. I would guess that many of you today here on the panel and even in the audience have probably engaged with a brand that communication was powered by Twilio in some way, whether it was SMS, email, etc. I see some people using Twilio. Thank you. Very exciting. But let me introduce some of the other panelists here. Caroline, if you wouldn't mind telling us a bit about yourself.
Happy to. My name is Caroline Tarpey. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Customer Success at a company called QuotaPath. We are a commission automation platform, but the way in which we do that automation is very focused on motivating your commission earners on what they've earned and what they could earn, which drives higher revenue outcomes, higher attainment, and ultimately impacts retention. And prior to that, I was the VP of Sales at a company called Kazoo, which is an employee experience platform. And that took place over sort of the first 2 years of the pandemic. So I just became very passionate about the topics we're going to talk about today, that experience.
Fantastic. And I'll hand it to Jessica to introduce.
Hey everyone, I'm Jessica Tessera. I'm a Senior Sales Development Manager at Flexport. Flexport is a company in the global logistics space. Our mission is to make global trade easy for everyone. Certainly, if you've seen any of the recent news around supply chain crisis, our company and our customers are very much involved in these high stressful times. But I'm excited to, share some of my experience leading, sales development teams.
Fantastic. Appreciate it. And Tim, we heard from you, so thank you. Let's jump right in with the first question. And this can be for anybody. If anyone wants to jump in, please do so. But I want to chat at a high level. I think what all of us really care about, Modern Sales Pros is a revenue-focused organization. Of course, revenues drive companies, right? So let's talk about how well-being plans, taking care of our teams and our employees, can actually uplift revenue. I'd like to hear from y'all. Anyone on the panel want to take that?
I'm happy to jump in and start. I think when you think about how you drive and increase revenue, I mean, it's a derivative of having a highly motivated and highly productive team. So how do you get to having a motivated and productive team? You look for the things that keep your top performers around. And I was fascinated by a study McKinsey put out last fall called something to the effect of like the Great Resignation or the Great Attraction. And how could you be attracting employees during this time period where people were shifting jobs? And they cited some stats around, 40% of employees are willing to leave a job without another job lined up.
Wow.
That's a lot. And the two things that employees cared about proportionally more than employers realized that they cared about were a sense of belonging and the sense that they were valued by their manager and their organization. And so these all play into well-being. So if we're guiding ourselves by these principles, the rest, the derivatives of those are we can have teams that are highly motivated, that want to get their quotas, that want to chase revenue, that work collaboratively.
Those are powerful stats. And I think we've heard that too. People don't leave companies, they leave managers. I've heard that phrase quite a bit. And that lines up exactly with that McKinsey study. Tim, I know you had a couple of things to say about this. Can you give us some examples of ways that you think about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's worth calling out that it's not often where people go to when they think about raising revenue, right? We tend to just be so focused on performance. We're often not like, let's increase well-being so that we can get to revenue, right? That's often like the overlooked.
Great point.
It's like recovery is often overlooked in that way. And I think oftentimes we forget especially in revenue generating positions. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And we act like it is just a short-term race. But it's not. There is no off season in this. We're constantly going. There's new goals. They only get bigger time and time again. So the way I think about well-being and lifting up revenue is really about how do you encourage and create an environment for people to take those small moments, whether it's during it's not just the vacations, it's not just the the PTO and those sorts of things. It's got to be something for people every day, right? And that's what each individual needs to do. It's what each team needs to do, each leader. And then as an organization, what are you providing to your people to help enable that and design an environment for people to be successful?
It's not just time off and flexible time policies, though, Tim. What are some other ways that you've thought about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, at Blueboard, we really live our mission. It's all about indulging in a passion, challenging a comfort zone, trying something new. We have a dedicated Slack channel where people are sharing those experiences, and we're celebrating people doing those things. It's not just like, oh, go take your PTO. People are doing these things, whether that's a nice night out or they're going on vacations, and being celebrated for it and sharing it and creating connection, to Caroline's point about that connection to the values and the mission, which goes a long way to really living your values. And we see that show up time and time again.
Yeah. And I think that point about a marathon, not a sprint, right? This is a long-term investment in your people. Jessica, what do you have to say about well-being impacting revenue?
Yeah, I mean, I love that this is a topic, and I think it's important to note that there is actually research out there that shows that organizational well-being can provide a company with a return of 3 to 5 times the original investment. So there is data that actually does prove this. It's not just great things that we're talking about. But specifically, I think for organizations, and whether you're in a small organization or a big organization, it's great that overall, like HR teams or leaders within teams are creating opportunities for access to well-being, whether that is things like telehealth recently, or like access to telehealth, or setting up programs like meditation events or yoga events, and just actually being a leader who broadly shares like anything that your company might be putting on like for these spaces, and encouraging your team members to attend these and take the opportunity, take that time to attend anything that the company might be doing.
Love that. And those are some great studies. I saw some things pop up in the chat. If you are encouraging your leaders to take on well-being plans, there's some ammunition for you. So great. Thank you, Caroline and Jessica. I thought I'd add a quote that I had heard in the past, and I'll explain what these acronyms mean, but I've heard that increases in ESAT are equal to increases in NPS, which equal increases in EPS. So broadly saying is if you increase your employee satisfaction, you can increase your net promoter score because your employees make your customers happy. If your customers happy, that increases your EPS, your earnings per share, if you're a public company, or just flat out revenue. So we've seen these things, and there's a lot of studies and ways to think about that, but really good kickoff to the discussion today. I'd love to get into maybe some brass tacks, as it were, into some examples. And Jessica, I think you hit it on the head here with large versus small companies, because there are nuances to how we think about that. But have you, and maybe Jessica, will go right back to you, is there any strategies for how you've created the supportive workplace to get your teams operating at their fullest capacity? Can you share some more examples there?
Yeah, and I know we just glazed over like taking PTO off, but I think it is just important to say, like, you lead by example when you take PTO, right? So that is actually like planning ahead and showing your team members that you can plan for, a longer PTO 3 to 4 weeks out, taking that time off and like not maybe responding to the emails, maybe you're checking them, but like don't respond, right? And show them that they don't need to do those behaviors when they're out of office. For me personally too, like recently I went on maternity leave and like took full advantage of it. So if you have great parental leave programs, right? Like, definitely just encourage folks to take these things that companies actually are giving to you. And then other things, I saw some folks like talking about hybrid, Flexport is in a hybrid work model where we are not where like each team gets to decide like, hey, like, my team is going in every Wednesday, and then team members have the option to go into the office whenever they want to. And we're just, again, really encouraging, like, don't eat lunch and work, right? Like, take that time. It sounds really simple, but I see a lot of people, or I've heard a lot of people, right, like eating lunch at their desk, like trying to use that hour to eat. And you can't really enjoy food unless you're focused on eating the food. So, those are just like really small things that I think are really simple. But again, just if you practice as a leader, you set that example for your team.
That's awesome. One of the things that we've started to do, Twilio announced that we are fully remote into the future, but we still have really large offices. I'm here in Seattle. We have an office here. And I'm actually trying to be intentional about bringing people to the office for coffee, for lunch. And I'm telling them, we're going to go and just have lunch just to get to know each other as a team, right? Like, let's take that time and be intentional. So that's just amazing. And congrats on your baby. I see a couple of things popping up there. Yeah. Let's jump over to Tim. Any really good examples on ways that you've created a supportive workplace for your team to kind of operate at their fullest?
Yeah, I like your use of intentional there, Patrick. And I think that's super important, right? The way I think about it, it's like, what am I doing as a leader? And also, how am I leveraging all of the opportunities Blueboard's providing in general, right? As a company, right? Well-being programs, I feel like, and those resources often have very low engagement, right? Because like, people aren't thinking about that. People aren't thinking about those resources, right? Like at Blueboard, we have Spring Health for mental health support. We have ClassPass for physical well-being. We have ongoing team events. We have ongoing recognition that we're recognizing people for value. We have all these different things going on. Sometimes people can get lost in the mix on like what is actually available to them. So for me, it's about, how am I creating that environment on the team and knowing what each person needs, and knowing like when there's signs that maybe it's not going well for that person. But then also, how am I bringing some of those resources that our organization is providing front and center to make it easier for people to access them?
Yeah, Caroline, let's switch over to you. Any really good examples there? I also see some things popping up in the chat, so feel free to weave those in if we can.
Perfect. Yeah. So a couple things that we specifically do. We have a half-day Friday year-round, and we take it seriously. So when we talk about like capacity planning and number of hours or a week that we're assuming in that capacity planning, it's 36, not 40.
Mm-hmm.
But we have really, really productive teams during that time, because we believe that people need a dedicated space that can be some time that they're investing back in themselves. I even think about, I totally agree with Jessica on the example that you can set as a leader, even as a peer, that, I remember when I was early in my career and I had leaders who stopped work at a certain time every day, because like that's when they hit the gym or that's when they had dinner with their family, and they were intentional about carving out those spaces within the day. One thing that is common right now is for a lot of companies to offer unlimited PTO. We all know the curse of that can be that people don't actually take it. My current and prior companies both had us track PTO or track time off, not because it was restricted, but actually to catch instances where people were not doing so. And when COVID hit at my prior company, what we found is a precipitous decline almost overnight in people taking time off during what was a pretty tumultuous time for all of us, maybe still sanitizing our groceries at that point. And it gave us an opportunity at that company to actually institute, we did summer half days on Fridays for a period of time to like really say, hey, from a leadership perspective, we want you to take this time. Like, we know that that's very necessary. And then on the question around the challenges of hybrid, it's a really fascinating one, because I've been in my current company has more of an in-office perspective. My last one was more remote. Like, do a survey, see what the sentiment is with your employees. We hired people for their desire to be in office, but when we did a survey at my current company, we found that they wanted to be in office 3 days a week, with 2 of those days mandated, so other people would be there, and the third of their choosing. And that was 100% what we found across the board. So I think that gives you an opportunity to really adapt policies to your specific culture and employee base.
Yeah, there's a tough question that I'm not sure I can fully answer. I have worked in some manufacturing very early in my career, but not recently, in terms of how do you motivate and create these well-being plans for people paid by the hour, and whether they have to focus on production, quality, and safety. I know we chatted about this in our pre-brief, but there's an element that I think can play here, which is getting to know your team and what they care about. Like what Caroline was just mentioning was like, okay, we hire people for these offices, but we found out pretty quickly through, I'm assuming, surveys you administered. Can you give us maybe a little more examples about ways that you maybe, one, globally connect with your employees, but then as a manager in these small pods can find out more about your team? Anyone can please jump in and answer that one.
Yeah, again, I also don't have like exact experience in an actual plant. However, like one thing that I think in terms of like connecting with a team member or with your team broadly is like, can you create an environment of like care and psychological safety, like in a one-on-one environment? So if you are doing like any check-ins or having one-on-ones, with individuals, and you're asking like, how are you? I know, for example, recently I asked just sort of that simple question, and my like instincts kind of went up when the team member just said like, I'm okay, right? And I could have just like moved on and gone into the planned agenda, but like taking that time to really pause and maybe just either giving them space to really not maybe like they don't have to like overshare, but just actually saying like, hey, like, do you actually need like an extra like half day, like some time, like let me know what's going on. Do you have a personal matter? I obviously manage like a lot of more like younger like talent in the workforce, right? And so they're navigating how to be professional and not make, and especially with new talent too, or sorry, new hires, right? Like they maybe don't want to start off with the wrong foot by asking for time off, but we all know that there's like life that's happening. So I think just being empathetic and trying to create those psychologically safe spaces for people to actually feel like they can share, because maybe sometimes they just want someone else to know, and then they can actually get back to the work. Or maybe you have to determine, hey, actually, like you're not in the right headspace, and like let's get you some coverage, or let's figure this out.
That's a good point. That safe space, that one-on-one time where you can kind of have the empathetic human to human conversation is really important. Tim, do you have any good examples there of ways that you've gotten to know your team and more deeply and kind of maybe adapted what you thought they needed to suit their needs?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm recently back at Blueboard, and the previous company I was at, working closely with our director of client success. She had us put together these user manuals from the leadership team all the way to individual employees. And I haven't brought it back to Blueboard yet, but I just love the idea, right? Like, here's my user manual, and handing it to somebody. And then we could all see, like, how is this person motivated? How does this person like to be recognized? Like, what else is going on in this person's life? What are their interests, right? So it gives you this starting point, especially with not being in an office or in hybrid work environments where you don't get that casual, like, get to know you, just have those conversations at passing by. I found that as just a fantastic tool to just kind of set a benchmark and really give you an opportunity to go deeper with people and then learn from there once you already have that user manual in your hands and know where to start.
Yeah, I have one of those myself. Maybe show of hands to the panelists. Do we all have an operating manual or user manual? Yeah, I think that was, I found out about, I think Sheryl Sandberg has a book. Was it Lean In that she talked about her user manual? I forget exactly, but that's why I adopted mine. It's an interesting thing. One of a couple things that I've used, and they're a bit more academic, but you can break them down and make them feel fun, is perhaps to do Myers-Briggs with your team. There's a free version called 16 Personalities. I think you just Google that. I've also done StrengthsFinder 2.0, which is a book based off of Tim Rath. Another way to have fun and just get to know your team in different ways. And then how I frame that as a leader myself is, here's my operating manual. Here's my Myers-Briggs score. Here's my strengths. But what I really want from them is to learn their strengths, their communicating styles, so that I can adapt to them, right? As a leader, it's my job to figure out how they want to be communicated with, not the other way around, right? And so that's really important. I see some questions popping up we will get to in just a moment. I want to jump into a little bit around the sales culture aspect, because there's some nuances there, right? As we think about different styles of work. And I saw a question pop up around commissioned work. How do you have a healthy sales culture, whether it's monthly, quarterly, annual, based on your path to market, right? Being SMB to enterprise there, and longer sales cycles or shorter sales cycles. How do you drive that urgency in a sales culture while also, managing work-life balance, managing these well-being plans we're talking about? Caroline, maybe I'll start with you if you don't mind jumping in and chatting a little bit about that balance of sales culture and urgency and drive with well-being, that all these examples we're talking about.
Well, I think it starts with the recruiting process and in what you're looking for in the people that you bring on board, and how you instill that afterwards. So, we're very proud of having and continuing to curate a culture that's both competitive and collaborative. So I point blank tell people in the hiring process, I expect you to want to be number one on the leaderboard and to fight for that. I also expect that you're not going to leave scorched earth behind you on your way to number one, because with the growth goals we have, no one individual is going to achieve them. So I'm bringing people on board who are going to work well within a team and who are going to be additive to the collaborative culture that we've built. And we couple that, it's an interesting question about how do you balance psychological safety without having too much. We've told our team members these principles are how you promote your track record of achievement, your ability to collaborate within the team, and the spirit of extreme ownership. So I've encouraged people to read that book. The big takeaway for me from that is, your individual success is not at odds with the success of the mission. And as an individual, regardless of your own leadership aspirations, you should care as much about the success of the mission as the success of self. And I think if you can breed that mindset, then, it's less about, I personally think that every instance where these come up, where people are sort of maybe oversharing, and more reinforcing, we're operating from this mindset of succeeding on the mission together. These are the ways the culture is competitive and collaborative, and these are the ways that you earn promotion. And I find that people will tend to self-select out of it if they don't have that perspective, right? If they're there to sort of use it as a therapy session, then that it's kind of at odds with the cultural mindset that you're promoting. So those are a few principles we drive.
Great principles, competitive yet collaborative. I always talk about the phrase, a rising tide raises all ships.
Definitely.
Which is, and I have an example. I think Jessica, you had some more, but like that word again comes up, being intentional as a leader to set time out. I know one of my operating principles is to host my forecast call, probably a bit different than other leaders do. I actually tell my reps, only 20% or so of this forecast call is for me. Yeah, I'm going to go through MedPick. We're going to do some deal inspection, but really this time is 80% driven by y'all. Like, this is for you, by you. And I want us to share what's working and what's not working, and ask your peers questions, because maybe they face that scenario as well. I know, Jessica, you commented, we chatted around your operating rhythms. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so kind of similarly to a user manual, we even have like a team operating rhythm manual, right? So for all new hires, or just in general, if other teams are curious, and maybe we update these every 6 months when we change our meeting structures. But every meeting should really be intentional, right? There should be an agenda. It should be useful. And even if you have sort of an office hours meeting, or, a space where people can just catch up, just designing and making and communicating the intention of those meetings. Also just setting clear expectations, are these mandatory? Or if you have a customer call, you don't have to be here. It's okay, right? Letting people have that autonomy over understanding, what is quote unquote mandatory, or what are things that, it's okay if I miss, or what's the intention of the meeting. It's funny, you just talked about the pipeline meeting, because we have different meetings where it's more collaborative and people are sharing best practices during our stand up. And then there's a pipeline meeting where I'm hey, I actually need this because I have to report up. And I know this isn't necessarily the thing that you want to be doing, but thank you. I need this in order to go up to my leaders. So yeah, it's just about, I think, being really honest and transparent about the intention of the meeting and the purpose.
I love that approach, because there are things, look, we all have duties in our role to report up. There's always a boss, there's always a board, there's always somebody. We do have to get this underlying data. But if you can mix in those meetings and make it, put a purpose and goals out. Tim, I'd be curious on some of your examples. I know you referenced some books and some great examples earlier that you can share.
Yeah, so Caroline's point really resonated with me, the competitive yet collaborative. And it reminded me of an article I read on Revenue Inc. A little while back on A players. And I just pulled it up to read it. It's A players typically have a 90% chance to be in the top 10% of their pay class and someone who makes others on the team better. And when I'm recruiting and when I'm hiring, that's something that I'm very clear on. That is the expectation, that we should all be driving toward that same goal, because at the end of the day, it's success of the overall mission. And, I have an interesting background coming from the Marine Corps to nonprofit work to now tech sales, right? It's all very mission driven. And like, we only get there as a team. That's the only way we're all successful. We're not successful if one person's successful. So for me, it's, trying to create that space on a team, as you talk about forecasting, to have those forecast calls, but then also have those one-on-one calls so that there is just space just to talk. Where are you stuck? Where do you have opportunities? More focused time so that you are personalizing and you are giving that individual approach. And then I think the second point is, we have such a push for excellence all the time and pushing toward the goals and the numbers. We also need to be recognizing that all along the way and taking a step back to celebrate people in a way, again, that is meaningful for them.
There's a challenging question that popped up from Joyce around, I'll read it. We have a small, intimate team of 12 and embrace a culture of transparency. Our employees have complete psychological safety now that has gone too far, with employees feeling comfortable having very vulnerable conversations, and it feels as we're providing therapy sessions. I could also imagine there may be some non-work related items that come in there and perhaps pose human resource, people services challenges and the types of conversations that are happening. So how do you maybe overcorrect if the pendulum has swung too far? And this is kind of unplanned for the panelists here, but maybe there's some book recommendations or different management techniques you've used, but how do you reset expectations just in general if they've gone too far? That's a challenging one. Anyone willing to take that?
Yeah, so honestly, like I don't know like what like position, this the person who's asking the question is coming from, but sort of how I would initially approach this is honestly just try to address it in like one-on-ones and maybe say like, hey, thank you so much for like being so vulnerable and trusting me, with some of these things. Started to notice that a lot of these conversations are happening like during, in like productive work. Like if they're happening during like productive work hours, right? Like then that's not really the intention of, I think, the space. So it's just kind of assessing like, when are those conversations happening? Like if they are happening more like, like after work or dinner and things like that, right? Like that's also very different because I know it's 12 people, like maybe it's like really, really startup-y and you're like just all the time. But I would just try to create those boundaries and just start to try to address it. And especially if you don't have HR processes in place, right? Like I think it's really just like coming back to like the mission, the goals, and trying to center around, okay, like, is this a friend conversation or is this actually like a coworker, colleague? Like, are we driving the business forward?
I think that's pretty astute there. The main recommendation I heard, going one-on-one to start, right? Addressing that, having that very intimate conversation one-on-one, because calling it out in a meeting, a broader session becomes a little combative. And hey, that may be, if it gets to the point of having a moderator and using, I know early in my career, I learned the moniker OCDAC, OCDAC, open, clarify, develop, agree, and commit. So you may need to get all the way to the point of conflict resolution. Hopefully you don't, by using Jessica's technique of just chatting one-on-one. But there's an element there. I know I've experienced going from a startup very small team, 50, 60 people. I've worked at even very much smaller than that. But there's a point at which you start growing. There's this hyper growth that a lot of us dream of. And then we kind of get into these awkward teenage years where the things that were normal in a small company are no longer normal when you reach 100, 200. So you do have to have those conversations. And I also think even before you have those one-on-ones, you and the other leaders probably need to have open and honest conversations about that and get their opinion and their feedback. And there needs to be a concerted effort as a leadership group to probably bring that message to the team and start to morph that, right? Caroline, I saw you come off mute earlier. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I had two thoughts. One is I saw a humorous but unfortunately quite true kind of cartoon example of what often happens in challenging performance situations, which is it was done through the lens of someone driving a vehicle up to an approaching cliff. And the person's driving the vehicle at 60 miles per hour and getting closer and closer. And the little thought bubbles are coming up saying, like, this is when somebody should have had a first conversation. This is when somebody should have had the third conversation, right? And then they're about to drive off the cliff. And it says, this is when the company actually introduces a PIP and really addresses what's going on. And I think, another book reference, Radical Candor, is a great resource for thinking about how you have challenging conversations and how you approach things from both a direct and empathetic point of view within organizational culture, which are two very challenging things to sometimes have coexist. And they're not things that are necessarily intuitive, especially for your frontline managers. And remember, that's who most of your employees are interacting with day to day. Like, that is their experience of your company. So, we really have to think about how are we coaching the right mindset and skill set in our frontline leaders to where they're having the conversation way back here on the screen and not waiting until someone is about to go off a cliff and wonders why this wasn't addressed with them earlier. That doesn't guarantee the behavior will change, but I find the majority of people, given the right guidance and the right conditions for success, want to be successful. If that's not the case, then certainly you will ultimately progress to the performance review and you can make a decision to exit if you need to. But I think you can really avert that if you get proactive.
Yeah. Tim, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you have to look at the system that's creating that environment as well, right? You have to address it with the person one-on-one, but also address the entire system that's allowing that type of space for maybe things to go off the rails. And recently read Radical Candor, great book. There's elements of that reminded me, if anybody's read John McMahon's book, Qualified Sales Leader. And he talks about caring is competence, right? So often we think that there's this disconnect of maybe being too easy, or maybe like, oh, I don't want to like ruffle feathers, or I don't want to, or you're gonna be a little disengaged. But letting people know what they need to do to be successful, and also understanding how people are defining success, and helping them be competent in that way. In that situation, I was explaining, like, is that negatively impacting the goals, the organization? Is that negatively impacting the team? There's a lot of things to factor in there. So it's not easy. It's not easy to have those conversations. It's not easy to balance. But at the end of the day, if we're helping people be successful, we're helping the company be successful, that's the best way to show we care.
Love that. Empathetic approach to leadership, Tim. Thank you. We had some other, first of all, great book recommendations, and there's a whole bunch of these posted in the public chat, and it'll be likely shared out as well by our moderator, Eduardo. So thank you. There's a couple other questions around return to work and hybrid and the dreaded Zoom fatigue. I'd be curious how y'all are managing that at your companies. Any perspective? Maybe the Zoom fatigue one is one we can start.
I just answered because I wasn't sure if we're going to get to it. And I love this question because I think everyone has Zoom fatigue. And I think it's okay now that we're living in this like hybrid world where we've seen each other a lot over video, to just make it okay that sometimes like you can be video off. And it's like, it's not like, right, like a terrible thing if someone's video is off, just like if they're in like back-to-back meetings, like maybe they just want to be video off. And then the other thing I mentioned is like, could some of those meetings like be a phone call? right? And just like, I love taking like walking meetings and just like calling a colleague. Like we forget that like the phone is still a good way to communicate. So those are just 2 examples.
I love that. I routinely will walk my dog and take calls in the morning. And I encourage my team to do that too. Like, hey, y'all should, and actually and this is odd, maybe not everybody do this. I have a bike, a cycling trainer. Think of it like a Peloton. I'm a little bit more of a nerd. I'll take calls in a zone 2 heart rate, like very easy pedaling. I'll take calls on my bike, and my team knows I'm cycling. They can hear it like whirring in the background. But as long as I can hold a conversation, I actually find I'm more mentally engaged and stimulated if I'm moving and up and standing. So encourage your team to do that. I love that approach. Caroline or Tim, any way you want to round out this discussion on Zoom fatigue and hybrid before we wrap up?
I'm happy to add something small but specific, which is we kind of forget to literally spend some money and investment on people who are in remote environments.
Yeah.
So we're reminded when we're together, we should pay for that experience to go to the restaurant together, go to the happy hour, bring something in, whatever it is. But there are a lot of interesting companies who have popped up throughout the pandemic or even previously. I actually think Blueboard's a great example of an investment you can make in experiences for your employees. Another company called Purple Cork popped out of the pandemic. They do super high-end wine tasting events that you can, everything is shipped to you, the highest quality fine wine and cheeses, the winemakers on the call. So I know these are simple, but we think all the time about, we set aside budget for, our on-site, but folks who are in a remote environment can have ways to engage too in experiences. We just have to remind ourselves that we shouldn't look at it as a cost-cutting measure.
Love that approach. Tim, take us home on this one.
Yeah. So, Patrick, you had touched on a little bit about being more intentional with using this. We still have an office space in San Diego and bringing people together. We're having our first QBR in person in the next 2 weeks. So starting to do that, to get out of, it's just really kind of changing the pace, changing the cadence, getting people to getting them to connect in a different type of way. So we are starting to do a lot more of that with team events and some other activities. And I think we've already started to see some impact and some improved connection, being able to mix it up and do some more of those things.
Very cool. Well, I've learned a ton from y'all, so thank you. I'm always trying to get better and have that growth mindset, as it were, because this is not an easy topic. It can be a bit unnerving. It's stressful. There's all these things to consider, but I think I heard a bunch of words about being intentional, being empathetic, getting to know your team. Yes, you can be competitive and collaborative at the same time. So really good takeaways. And I need to go on Amazon and order some books here in just a moment, because my goodness, really good resources. So thank you all. If there's any more questions, we're happy to take them in the chat here. Otherwise, I think we're just about at time today.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
That was amazing. I think MSP will have to open a library after this, because it was so many great book recommendations, so many articles. Can you hear me still? My microphone said muted for me, so I was like, oh. We will have to open a library. That was so great. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, panelists, for this amazing conversation. I learned a lot. I was like crazy taking notes during this event to make sure that we will have the best key takeaways available for everyone who attended. I saw some questions in the chat asking if the resources will be available. Yes, we are creating a page in the MSP website in the previous events. Right now, you're going to see the recording there. We're going to see all the books that the panelists mentioned. And we also have some resources for you, like articles and other things that you can look at. But for right now, I want to say thank you for Blueboard for sponsoring this event, and thank you to all panelists. I learned so much today. And while the panelists and I hang out backstage, our MSP team will make sure that the recording and all those great resources will be available on the website. And once you are there to get this amazing knowledge, don't forget to check our upcoming events. We hope to see you soon in some events that we have. So just check the agenda and we will be together again in the future. Thank you, panelists. We can go backstage and have a little bit of fun there. Bye-bye.